Michelle Jingris alongside Anson Carter, and we now welcome in two-time Super Bowl champion Damien Woody. Damien, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you guys for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Damien, good to see you, my man.
Same here, man. Same here. I've been looking forward to this.
So fans might be wondering why we have former NFL player Damien Woody on Around the NHL, but that's because you're a huge Islanders fan and you've been very active on Twitter throughout their run. So just before we dive in, I guess, on this team, what made you an Islanders fan to begin with?
Yeah. Yeah. So what happened was last year, you know, I had tweeted out how the New York sports scene just sucked. Like all the teams, everyone was losing. And then I get these tweets from the fans like, hey, dude, you need to check out the Islanders. The Islanders are balling. And then the Islanders reach out, I'm like, hey, we're over here. You know, look for us. We're kind of doing some major things over here. I think they were in the middle of a 17-game winning streak or something like that. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up hooking up with the Islanders, going to a game, and it just was it was just a great match. And they really treated my family and I very well. And we just became hooked. We became hooked not only the Islanders, but just hockey in general. And this has just been a blast so far.
Speaking of great sports towns, we both played in Boston, New England. I remember going out. There was nights at Daisy Buchanan's late night where we had guys from the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, the Pats, and Drew Bledsoe was out all the time when we were out. And I always wanted to be a quarterback if I played football. If you played hockey, what position would you play?
Oh man, I would have to be a defenseman. I would have to be, you know, one of those guys, man, because I don't think I'm not the skilled type of guy, you know, the flash guy. That's not me. You know, I'm an offensive lineman. We're not used to flash and glory. You know, I'm used to the grunt work. So I would probably have to go with that line for me.
Okay.
You mentioned that you went to an Islanders game. I'm curious, was that game at the Coliseum? And also just talk a little bit about the atmosphere of an Islanders game, because it is one of the most unique venues in the NHL.
Yeah, so I went to a Toronto Maple Leafs game. That was my first game, and I actually solicited the fans to say, well, which game should I go to first? And everyone to a T hit me back with like, no, you got to go to a Toronto Maple Leafs game because John Tavares was a former Islanders and just all of this, I guess, called hatred towards John Tavares when he left in free agency to go to Toronto. So we went to the game, and the atmosphere at the Collie was unbelievable. The energy there was unreal. I'm like, wow, wait a minute, I've been missing out on all this time, and it was great. And like I said, my family was hooked, and that's really been it ever since. I've been watching all of their games ever since.
I want to talk about your former coach, Damien. You played for Coach Belichick, widely respected as probably the best coach in the NFL history. And then Islanders are coached by a guy named Barry Trotz. Similar kind of mentality, defense first. What other similarities do you see between both those coaches?
Yeah, like when I watch Barry Trotz's like press conferences, the one thing you see is he's so even keeled. I mean, think about, you know, the game, you get blitzed by Tampa Bay Lightning 8-2. And it was no flinch. It was basically, you know what? We just need to get back to who we are as a team, play to our fundamentals, and we'll be just fine. And that's the way Coach Belichick always used to coach us. He was great on fundamentals, great on game plan, and he never flinched regardless of the highs and the lows. To me, that's the sign of a Hall of Fame type of coaches. Don't flinch when you get into these type of situations.
I totally agree with you. I've also noticed that both coaches have similar styles with just how disciplined their teams are as well. Yes. But I want to switch gears a little bit because we're seeing what it's like to not have fans in arenas for the NHL playoffs, and the intensity hasn't dropped off at all. I'm curious though, Damien, obviously part of football games is the atmosphere, and to start the season at least, some stadiums won't have any fans in attendance. How do you think players will respond, and do you expect to see any difference in intensity, because it is going to be a little different?
Yeah, that's going to be I think that's a major question mark as we enter into the 2020 season. I know as a former player, played 12 years, I always drew the energy off the fans, whether it was home or away. You know, that's just the competitive juices that flows in all of those guys. So I'm really curious to see not only the fans and say, but no preseason. They didn't have any warm-up games. So you're jumping right into the frying pan, you know, this weekend. So I think it's going to be a different looking game this weekend because these guys aren't not in the best condition because you haven't had preseason games. And on top of that, there's no fans. It's going to be artificial crowd noise being pumped into these stadiums. So it's going to be a little weird.